Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Gorley, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in today for another episode of the Injury Prevention Academy, a podcast brought to you by DORN Companies, the country's leading wellness-based pain management and injury prevention company. DORN is committed to reducing costs of healthcare and workers' compensation, as well as reducing lost productivity, which has resulted in over $120 million in savings over the last 20 years for our clients. Joining us today is Martha Hagmaier. Martha has a focus on total worker wellness and has over 10 years of experience developing and executing localized plans in 11 different countries in the biotech and video game industries. Welcome, Martha. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I think I'm really excited for our talk today, just because I know that, over the last couple of years, the focus on true total worker wellness has really come to the forefront with different companies. And obviously the last couple of years, it's been kind of a learning curve for everyone.
Yes, I agree. There's some organizations out there who wellness was a thing for them before it even became a thing. And the early adopters were in there with many organizations. But to your point, with the pandemic and what we've been through of recent, it's really put many initiatives, I think, that might have been kind of good to have or maybe nice to have in the forefront and put them in the fast lane to bring them to fruition. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think virtual platforms was a big part of that, for wellness, but also for connecting with your workforce. And it really expanded at a rate that average workers had never seen before. Even DORN developed a number of virtual solutions, most notably Self-Care Plus, in support of clients because of this, kind of separation between the regular office environment and just where people were working. So what are some of the lessons that you believe that we can possibly continue to use as some of us create kind of what I would call a normal office environment, whether it's in the office or remote?
Yes, great question, Catherine. There's so many lessons that we've learned along the way, and as we continue to learn. And I think that's one really important aspect that we all have to keep in mind, is that the playbook hasn't been written and passed out now. We're still writing it, as we continue moving forward, and that's on a global scale. But being able to leverage one another, lessons learned, practices, things that we failed at, and, understanding why, and then being able to share that out with one another is so incredibly important. Because one aspect of it too is something may not work for one organization and yet work for another. So recognizing that, we are all human beings, and, looking at things from a well-being perspective, that we are looking at it from an individualized, personal approach for folks, and really understanding who our demographics are, really understanding what it is that we're trying to solve for. And that's a continuum. I think that that's a super important piece of it as well. So definitely one of the biggest learnings is that it isn't over and done with, if you will. You may have a great program in place, but the aspect of making sure you reevaluate it, 2 months in, 3 months in, as situations change, right? Maybe things change within your organization. Mask mandates, do we have them, do we not? Vaccine mandates, do we have them, do we not? And again, that global aspect of it, and what your company culture is as well too. Super important to take those factors in. And then technology, as you mentioned, being such an amazing component that we can take advantage of. I think, many of us can say it doesn't replace the in the room, in-person component, but it has really helped bring people together when done well and when done right. I had the privilege of participating in DORN's virtual physical therapy, and it was amazing to be able to experience it and to provide some feedback from both a user as well as a corporate professional in well-being to be able to give that feedback. And again, there's great companies out there that are that forward thinking that people should really look at to take advantage of that and what else are they doing, because they're not just keeping one solution, right? They're continuing to evolve and staying ahead of the curve. And so I think looking at organizations that do that when you are looking for solutions is really a smart way to go.
Yeah, and I think almost re-educating ourselves and kind of gaining a better understanding of the true difference between, going to the doctor through your insurance as opposed to wellness. And I think that the mental health aspects of it, as it pertains to overall employee wellness, I think has really come to the forefront.
Absolutely. There's so many great organizations out there. Mental Health of America, for instance, which also has an international branch. I mean, there's so many great organizations who are true advocates of mental health. And I think it's one of the important aspects when we look at mental health and how we even talk about it, from the aspect that it's we talk about physical health and we automatically think of physical health. We see pictures of people who are very fit and running and, doing all kinds of great yoga moves. But yet when we look at advertisements about mental health, we see people holding onto their faces or being upset. And it's interesting how we make that, that correlation there, which I think can be adjusted, quite honestly, and really instead thinking about it, coming at it from a good mental health perspective. And again, there's the continuum that, when we may be in crisis, but we also just may be having a bad day. And so
Right.
organizations being able to acknowledge that and being able to say, hey, let's meet you where you're at. If you're just having a bad day, what solutions do we have? Do we give you an app like Calm? Do we have other stress management applications? Or are you at a point where maybe you do need to see a therapist? And that's okay too. And what kind of programming do we have for that? So again, that full continuum and spectrum, allowing the employees to experience the mental health that they are experiencing in the moment and being able to say it's okay because we have solutions for you.
Absolutely. And I think one of the difficulties that a lot of companies ran into in the last couple of years is so many employees are working from home, but how do you promote and truly implement wellness for everyone within your workforce, whether or not, they're virtual or they're truly physically in the office? And I think a
Yes,
lot of
yes.
different companies ran into not sure where to approach it with, but also how to really have each of your employees feel like they're involved.
Yes, so true. And, it really comes down to the bottom line of education, right? Both for the employees and honestly for the company to take the step back and say, what do we have in our toolkit? What are our benefit offerings currently? What's our EAP usage as an example? What is the usage of it? And is it effective? Right? And being able to really take a good look at that and then partnering with those organizations, with your EAP and saying, okay, clearly we need to level up. If you guys haven't already thought about it, how are you addressing EAP for our folks who are virtual as opposed to being in person, right? And being able then again, as we were talking about, then you get to the stage where you're now back on campus. Okay, what does the EAP program look like now, right? So it's taking a look at these programs of each stage that your organization is going through, all the services that employees have, and being able, most importantly, Catherine, what you said, the communication is so key. And employees are getting inundated with so much information at different times. Being really succinct. Having the message ideally come from your leadership, whether it's your CEO, your chief people officer, and the managers as well too, of course, reiterating, that yes, this is something that we believe is important, and I'm doing it too, right? Walking the talk, if you will. But having very clear bite-sized messages go out to your employees about what are the offerings that we have. Providing hyperlinks, if you will, to maybe you have an intranet page or something to the employees, and just reinforcing it, constantly reinforcing it. What does your company's homepage look like? Do you have a section there just about the top resources around mental health, physical health, these kinds of things? I think that those are easy wins. And I think that once we can get those in the hands of the employees, and they recognize that it's there, and that it's okay to use, I think that's the other big one. Testimonials from fellow employees, especially leaders, saying, how they've used something, or even if it wasn't their own personal experience, how it benefited somebody else within the organization that they know. There's nothing more empowering than hearing someone else's success story.
Yeah, and I think having a company letting their employees know that communication's okay. It can't just be, say, all right, we're going to implement a wellness plan because we've been told we have to do it, and we'll send off a single email and, oh, cool, we're done. No,
Right.
This is about creating a true communication between your senior management, your supervisors, your workers, whether out on the floor or out in the field, and creating that open line of communication, so that if someone recognizes that they need that wellness plan, they feel, like you said, empowered to actually say something about it.
Absolutely. And I think for those that are doing the communication about wellness, it's so important to interweave it into all aspects of what employees are doing. Professional development, for example, let's just say there's a program that your learning and development team, your HR team is rolling out that has to do with employees and, training for managers. What aspect, you should be asking ourselves, what aspect of well-being are we embedding in that training for managers? Such a great opportunity to help managers also look at their people, especially as people managers, embedding some well-being aspects, knowing the basics about your EAP program, your medical, dental, vision program, if you have MD Live Health, these kinds of things, just the basics. And again, reiterating that to managers, where do they find that, so that when they're having a conversation with their employee, and who knows, something may come up where they're asking a question about it, that they can go, I know where to point you to. And that really shows that there's a culture of well-being, rather than just, as you were saying, checking the box, oh yes, we have a wellness program.
Right. And recognizing that, I think, is really it sounds really strange, but it's one of the good things that came out of the last couple of years.
Yes.
is this absolute shift, but kind of laser-like focus on making sure that employees are taken care of. I mean, obviously, with regular work, but even with remote work, your professional life and your personal life, it really blurs together. What you're doing at work, even if you're in the office, directly affects how your after work life is going to be. And then even more so with remote work, where sometimes you're in the exact same space that you're making dinner.
Exactly.
As you're working.
Exactly. You're so spot on, Catherine. So spot on with the whole, which is where I come from with a holistic approach around well-being. That it is truly mind, body, spirit, financial, and social. These are all aspects of what you were just describing. Being able for a person to be able to recognize where is their imbalance in the moment of their well-being, and being able to know where they can go to the company resources to be able to say, okay, you would want your employees, the first thing to say is, gosh, I'm really struggling about finances. What do I do? I know, I'll go to the company website under well-being and I'll see what resources we have available as a start, right? Like that would be, again, it's that culture of well-being that you want to foster in an organization, and employees knowing that there are all their aspects of themselves that can be addressed and supported through the organization and their partners.
Right. And I know that so much of it is about, I think, keeping that work and life separate, but it's also understanding that correlation. And I know that, especially for remote workers, as they started to navigate this whole idea of working from home, I know that workplace fatigue became issues as those kind of balances began to blur. Even nutrition, working from home, it's so easy to get up and grab a snack as opposed to, well, you're at work, you haven't brought that. So I'm I've been brainstorming ideas and talking to a lot of different people like yourself of how can you ensure that employees can stay healthy, but also injury free while working from home.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, it is really first being able to self-assess. What does your work environment look like right now, right? Hopefully with a lot of folks, as you were saying, I know from my own experience, folks were sent home and, they had their laptops and that was about it, right?
Yes.
And so, people working at their dining table, working on their bed, on their actual bed, there was a lot of that going on. And so taking a step back and as an organization, and I believe a lot of organizations have now, as we've come through to where we are. But if they haven't, and if there is still, the question around is to be able to take that step back and say, okay, what do we agree? And working with an organization like DORN, being able to say, what are the things that fundamentally we need to have a proper workstation for someone working from home? What are the basics? And so, I had done that with my partners in the organization previously. And, we came up with the checklist. These are the basics of what people needed to have. People went back to the office and were able to pick those items up, or in some cases, items were sent home to them. And so being able to have a basic workstation, and then being able to also provide them great programs around education and training. And what does that mean for you? Like, yes, you can sit in a chair for a certain period of time, but then what does the rest of your day look like? And how much movement are you getting in? Many of us have been on Zoom or other, camera related programs and meetings, back to back. When we were in the office, we had a meeting, we sat in a conference room, we said, okay, great. And we got up and we walked away to another room. And so being able to give yourself that time between meetings that you normally would, get up and going and getting a glass of water and coming back, doing a couple of quick stretches. Again, DORN has some great, stretching, but there's many other applications and programs that have just simple stretching exercises, rolling of the shoulders, et cetera, these kinds of things, just getting up out of your chair for a while. Sit-stand desks, of course, are awesome. And if that is something that organizations have. But the interesting thing, I think, is, and this is why I love the education, is, you can give someone a tool, a sit-stand desk, but how do they use it? And teaching them how to use it. Sit-stand desk doesn't mean that you stand 8 hours a day your first day that it arrives, right?
Right.
How do you build in those time periods to take a break, to sit, you have to build up to standing, and then even then taking breaks to sit. So it's super important that when you provide, I'll say, toys, tools, functional toys, if you will, to employees, that they also have to understand how to use them. Because to your point, when they're at home, they don't have the luxury of the subject matter experts there on site with them, whether it's an ergonomist, someone from workplaces or what have you, actually sitting there and telling them, what's going on. And again, that's why I love with DORN, is being able to have someone that can help you with these kinds of things, and other partners as well too.
Right. And stressing that importance of true ergonomics in the workplace. Even understanding that, especially if you're, my desk, I'll have to say, is just a standing desk. I have this old school, just really gorgeous desk that I found, but understanding that even the difference of lifting your computer screen, say 5 to 6 inches, is going to make such a huge difference if, say, someone is
Mm-hmm.
working from a laptop, because all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
you're going to feel those pains in your neck. Your shoulders are going to want to hunch forward just automatically. And I think getting,
Mm-hmm.
knowing the importance of getting up, stretching out your shoulders, really conditioning your body to be able to move the way you need it to. So when you get
Yeah.
up from your desk, you're not, oh my God, what have I done?
Right, exactly. Well, there's that old saying, motion is lotion, and it absolutely still rings true, even more so today,
Mhm.
because because of the situations with, meetings. And that would be one thing that I would say too, is, managers and leaders and wherever you are in any kind of leadership role, and that could even be you're creating a meeting with your colleagues, is setting the boundaries of a meeting. Something as simple as, okay, we are going to have 45-minute meetings, and so that becomes the norm, if you will, and you can create the norm. You could be the change agent to make that happen, and to be able to allow folks those 15 minutes to reset for the next meeting, go get that glass of water, get a quick stretch, whatever it might be. But by giving ourselves just that bit of time in between, speaks volumes again about that culture of health and culture of care.
Yeah, and is that where you really see the future of total worker health kind of heading? Is people taking those lessons from those last couple of years and starting to really implement how they are feeling better, how their employees are feeling better, and creating that culture?
Yes, 100%. I think, again, going back to the lessons learned from what we've been through and seeing what other organizations are doing that have been made things successful, that connection, the social connection, if it's a big piece to it is measurement, right? I know you're keen on
Mhm.
that as well too, is what is it that we wanted to try to achieve? And while we may, even if we didn't hit exactly the mark, did we make improvements? And what were employees saying about that now? Do they feel that there's this culture of care, that it's on a scale of 1 to 10, where do they see that? If you can hear from your employees that there is movement in a positive direction, keep doing it, right? And learning from other organizations of who and what they're doing that have created those success factors as well. I think it's so important, and just really adds value to an organization. And, when you think about keeping and retaining your talent and getting talent, there's such a big shift with employees. I'm sure you've read about this as well too, where folks are, taking a step back and going, well, if I can't work remotely, I don't know if I want to work for this company anymore. Now, obviously, there are certain roles and jobs that you have to, right? But if people are looking for that kind of flexibility, and they hear that you can work remotely, there right there is one of those check boxes of a culture of care.
Right,
So the
and
more that you
even,
can,
oh, sorry.
go ahead. Oh
Oh, I
no,
was
it's
going to
okay. Go
say,
ahead.
the more that I think companies can communicate with their employees that they have a focus on total worker health, that they have a focus on wellness, you're going to see that retention. Employees are going to stay with an organization where they feel like they're being cared for.
Absolutely. It used to be, this is obviously pre-COVID, but it used to be what are the amenities that the company has on site? And don't get me wrong, those could still be amazing. But again, we're talking about this new world of hybrid workers. And so there may be folks who need to 100% be, on site, and those that could be, 100% off site. And then there's those that's a hybrid, and many of those who might choose to be a hybrid. And so being able to have the option of because again, you want to make sure that you don't have these two camps, if you will, of the on-site versus hybrid. And if you go on-site, you get all these great amenities, and if you're off-site, you don't get those, right? So being really careful about whatever you're going to do for one part of the organization, how do you make it virtual? How do you allow for something comparable to those that are working remotely?
Right. And, especially in the tech industry where so many employees, I feel like they've adopted that kind of hybrid or remote system because, I mean, you don't need necessarily, in a lot of different organizations, you don't need a true working office. You can have those remote. You can have everyone working through a computer to connect in that way. But what common strains and work-related injuries have you seen with office workers in the tech field?
Yeah, definitely a lot of tech neck. So, as you were describing this, looking down at their computer and the shoulders and their neck, a lot there. Back as well, too. And actually, not as much wrist as I would have originally thought. But definitely the back, I attribute that to the sitting, and then the tech neck. So definitely a lot of upper body aches in there.
And you mentioned people taking those breaks in order to kind of reset their bodies, and I think that's where that kind of comes into play. And I think so often in those tech industries and the office environment, kind of, even remotely, you have the focus of, I'm going to sit in this chair and I'm going to be at my computer and I'm going to work. But understanding that that's where those work-related injuries are happening.
Absolutely. And giving folks permission to be able to get up and get away from their desks. People even just setting their own boundaries. We talk about self-care, right? And so being able to say, these are my hours, right? These are the times that maybe I take that hour during my lunch break. If you used to take your lunch break when you were at the office and you went and you had lunch with, a colleague or on your own or went for a walk, continuing to make sure you have those in your life when you're working from home. As you started off saying almost in the beginning, is many folks sort of the blurred line of I'm going to work till it's dark or whatever it might be, and just continuing throughout the day and being able to bring those healthy habits in, and the healthy habits that we have had and bringing them into your home office space is super important.
Absolutely. And I think obviously with everyone becoming more and more comfortable with the different technology solutions that either your own company offers or different companies offer, like I said, like Self-Care Plus, and we offer live self-massage trainings for office and remote workers. What do you believe is the role of true technology in safety and in wellness?
I would say, it's definitely there for education. I think it's a great support mechanism to reinforce good, healthy habits. I think when you have the right solution and the right partner that understands your company culture, and being able to make it that personalized approach that we were talking about, to reinforce the values that the organization has, and the values of the people that it reinforces through those services that it offers. I think that really speaks volumes, and that is when people will use the technology, understanding your company culture, and then having a partner that can help create programming that really does feel like it's personalized. I think that is where technology can really be an added value versus someone saying, oh, great, now I have yet another app or another thing on my phone that I don't even use, right? Because that's what we really want at the end of the day. We want people to be engaged. We want people to participate in their own care and to know that the organization has been thoughtful in their approach and in the care that they are offering to the employees.
Right, and I think having those tech solutions, being able to be personalized for your employees, because one issue that affects an employee is not going to be the same issue that affects the person next to them. And I think having that personalized output, or that personalized view, that personalized kind of almost one-on-one approach to safety and wellness, I think is actually going to propel the growth of a company.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, you know, the fact that the technology itself, if it's personalized, and you know, there's so many. I mean, again, we're talking about technology. There's so many great algorithms. There's so many great organizations that can help a company understand their population, their demographics, and you know, it's so, because I think sometimes well-being can feel overwhelming, because you know, here we are talking about a personalized approach, and you might have, you know, 13,000, you know, 100,000 plus employees, and you're thinking, oh my God, how are we going to make this personalized? But that's where technology can be such a great leverage, and being able to hone in so that people actually select into many things, and knowing that there's the benefit. If I'm willing to fill out this profile, what's the benefit to me as an employee of the information that I'm going to get, right? And so if that's marketed and shared with an employee effectively, there's the technology and the communication and the usage behind it, you know, will speak volumes to the success of the program.
Right, and I think that shift into growing an organization with that personalized technology, with employee wellness, I feel like it's going to become kind of a new normal for people working in an office environment, having those technologies at hand to benefit every aspect of your life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's so many simple ways that organizations can do that, you know. So we're right now, you know, we're obviously, you know, pretty much at the end of our flu shot era, if you will, for the season, right? But, you know, thinking about it from a flu shot reimbursement program, right? So traditionally, we would have a on-site flu shot clinic. Okay, that's great, right? And so again, looking at, you've got your two camps, right? Your on-site and your remote. And so that's great for your on-site, very convenient. Maybe you offer a drive-through one. So again, that takes care of your on-site, maybe some of your remote, but convenience, right? Because we're thinking about that aspect of it. So having a flu shot reimbursement program where employees could go to any, you know, accredited vaccine provider and, you know, get their flu shot and then submit a reimbursement form, something like that. Like, again, that's taking it to the next level. So why not offer all of those, right? And so that would be just one example of something that I would say to our folks listening is, when you're looking at your service providers, start having some of those conversations with them about the 3 different kinds of employee that you might have and how can they scale their services. And maybe some of them haven't thought about that yet, but that's where the dialogue begins, right? And a good partner organization will say, even if they don't know, like, let's try it. Let's see what we can do, right?
Right, and I think having that, you know, like we've said, that open communication as to what works, what might not for certain people, but what works for others, you know, having that dialogue is so important. And especially as, you know, because every single organization that you're going to go into, you're supporting a multi-generational workforce. You're supporting a very diverse cultural workforce, and sometimes even global workforce. Some of your employees are here in the US, some are in Canada, some are in the EU. So how do you feel like workers can be supported through wellness and leadership support when sometimes they're separated by some of those issues?
Yeah, great question. So I think really, for me, it comes down to having a global philosophy and then those localized solutions. And what I mean by that is, so what is the global philosophy? And that really comes down to having those conversations within leadership with the wellness committee and your influencers and leaders to say, what do we believe is important for well-being? And then being able to say on a large scale, and then being able to take that down to the next level and saying, okay, now what does this mean in Canada? Because to your point, what that means in Canada and what's available in Canada, and even within the different provinces within Canada, right? There's so many nuances there, but being able to then work through that. But as long as everyone agrees on what it is that is the global philosophy of what they believe the value and the goal is that's important, everybody can stand behind that, and there's more buy-in from leadership globally. There's more buy-in from employees globally because one part of the company or a country or location isn't getting something better or less than another, right? And it really helps equalize, I will say, because it's when you make it more of a localized solution, employees again understand that there's that thoughtfulness that went into what's available and what's possible. And also as an organization, being able to help manage the budget to be able to understand what's available and what's possible.
Right. And then even taking, like, let's say you don't have offices around the globe, you only have offices or like a single office, even creating that communication and that global outlook within a single office, understanding that within the multiple generations that are working within that office, there are different ways that you can approach each of your employees, but ultimately
Yes.
it's what's bringing everyone together.
Yes, that's very true. So it goes back to our communication styles, right? So what is available to you in your toolkit as an organization? As far as communication, do you have TVs across the campus for digital signage? Do you have, do you do flyers, just back to the old school paper, posted in the kitchen areas, right? Do you have channels like Slack channels that people can subscribe to? ERGs, employee resource groups, do they have a vehicle of communication? Your intranet site, right? The site that our employees go to for information. I think that's one great concept that you brought up, Catherine, is I'm thinking about this from all the different types of ways that you can communicate to the different generations or just different people's styles. I found it really interesting, in my work where I found that, I might think, oh, this, 50 plus person, they just want a mailer sent out. And they're like, are you kidding? Like, put it on my phone. If it doesn't come onto my phone, I'm not even going to notice it. Right. So, we don't want to be careful not to stereotype how people take in information, but being able to put it out there in multiple ways, so that people can grasp it comfortably in a way that makes sense for them.
Right. And understanding your employees and creating that communication, like I said, is going to allow your company to grow. It's going to create that culture of wellness that is really going to benefit everyone within the organization.
Yes. And I think when you can get your leadership on board about what the value is, what wellness and well-being means in that organization, that lends to the support, because anyone listening to this, I hope that they think about using their resources, meaning their colleagues in HR, their colleagues in workplaces, their colleagues in legal, their colleagues within marketing. It's great when you can have an elevator speech of what well-being means to the organization and be able to evangelize on it with others and finding those champions that say, hey, yeah, I work in marketing for, the organization, and I, design games, or But I'm such an advocate of well-being. I think, you know, it's so important. I'm happy to like be part of your wellness committee and, you know, work to create this movement within the organization. Because it's important. I know that many of us as well-being professionals tend to, you know, feel like we're carrying this load ourselves. And, you know, that leads to so many, you know, other things like burnout and so many things that, you know, just that take away from the cause. And so being able to share the passion and share the desire for change and for the company culture of health with others in the organization that don't necessarily wear the same hat as you really can help lead to the success and the movement that we're talking about.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you, Martha, so much for joining me today. And I absolutely love talking to you about some of these insights and how you can create those wellness plans. And yeah, this has been great.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know, I always appreciate speaking with you as well, and I really hope that that there are nuggets that people can take away that they can apply to, and know that they're doing a great job, whatever and wherever they are on the continuum, to keep going with it is super important.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining DORN's Injury Prevention Academy. Tune in next time to learn more about even more of the innovative steps and programs taking place in today's world of safety.